Welcome to Clark County Today. I'm your host, David Medor. We have Naylene Frunk here today helping us out with our interview. And we have a story from Kathy Marshack. You are a licensed psychologist here.
Yes.
And a family business coach, if I got that right.
Yes.
Okay. And your office manager, you are Michelle Latham. Welcome.
Thank
You have quite a story to tell here. You have been the subject of a major news article for an investigative journalism. What was the name of the paper?
The U.S. Observer.
U.S. Observer.
Right.
In a nutshell, can you just...
In a nutshell.
Well, okay. Briefly, you were a neighbor living here in Vancouver. And my voice here, you take over.
You live in Vancouver,
Right.
in Southwest Washington, and the report talks about what you've gone through in having to not just protect your civil rights, but regain them. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes.
How it all started, or the broad overview that David was
that we were talking about earlier. It is important for people to realize that just because we live in Vancouver, or we live in the U.S., or we live in Washington, or we're Americans, that your civil rights are protected. Because in my situation, that just didn't happen. My civil rights were totally ignored, stomped all over when some influential neighbors decided that I was in the way of a project that they wanted to accomplish. So that's kind of how it started in a nutshell. I don't know if you want to know the specifics yet, or...
Well, let me ask you. You live right across the railroad tracks, on the south side of the railroad tracks,
Right.
Next to Steamboat Landing.
Yes.
And you were a resident there since 1984?
1984 is when I moved in.
Okay,
yes.
you moved in there, and you are a licensed psychologist, so
Yes.
you work out of your home.
Yes.
And you've had a permit to work out of your home
Yes.
ever since then.
Right.
And since then, you've seen people, your neighbors, move in, houses be
Well,
constructed.
yeah, before Steamboat Landing had houses, I was living there.
So you were the original resident there.
Yeah, my house is a 1953 ranch house.
Okay.
So when Steamboat Landing moved in, when they started building houses in the late 80s, I saw the area grow. I mean, there used to be cows and horses around me. It was very rural. But I moved in 1984, started a home psychology. I'm a psychologist, so I started a home-based business in my house in 1987.
And you're a specialist in the field. You're a PhD.
Right, I have a PhD. I'm a psychologist. I was a social worker before I went back to school and got my PhD. And so anyway, I was functioning in an office in my home for many, many years. And then in 2004, it all changed. I got along with my neighbors. My house is near the Columbia River. I was totally stunned that all of a sudden I was being harassed, physically assaulted, screamed at. I even got arrested.
Okay, let me make sure we understand here. So you were operating originally as the sole resident in the area, and you would have periodically you have people come to your home, individuals that you would counsel,
Right.
and that would working fine. You're just simply working out of your home, which is another business, which is great for our economy.
Right.
And at some point, something changed, something significant changed, and it impacted your life to a very significant degree. And this unfolded a story that transpired over a period of years, cost you a lot of money, a lot of grief, a lot of stress, and you can figure out what was happening.
Right.
But now in hindsight, you've discovered some things that explains that whole thing, right?
It's true. That's the thing that was the most frightening about this harassment. When you have code enforcement officers coming to your door, issuing citations over things that I didn't do wrong. They complained about my dog, where I have my fence, that I even had an employee working for me, even though I had a legitimate home occupation permit that allows all of this. That's very frightening, you know. So what happened is I didn't understand why they were upset with me when for 20 years I'd had no problems.
Okay,
problems.
So you were just operating, continuing to do things as normal. You didn't change how you were doing things.
Nothing was different.
And one day something changed.
The thing that changed is that a new neighbor moved in, and then another neighbor moved in. And I had a couple of neighbors go together to see if they could drive me out.
Why? So all of a sudden you got new neighbors, and the new neighbors decided they don't like the original neighbor, and they're going to try to get you out.
Right.
Why would they do that?
Well,
I mean, were you?
In looking back, okay, it sounds kind of crazy, but what the neighbors wanted was a train horn noise quiet zone. So I live between Burlington Northern train tracks and the Columbia River. Our houses are along Evergreen Highway, right? So they wanted a train horn noise quiet zone. And
can you explain that for those of us who don't
And what that would
understand?
require is that currently the trains blow their horn as a safety feature, obviously. In fact, Michelle's husband has worked for Burlington Northern for years. He's been an engineer for the train company. They blow their horns because of people, animals, cars crossing the tracks. And a lot of people don't know that into Vancouver is a very busy track. It has maybe 40, 50 trains a day going at 70 miles an hour past my house. The only train crossing that I can use is an old, narrow, one-lane, very steep train crossing with 2 stop signs on either side. When the neighbors wanted a quiet zone where the trains wouldn't blow their horns, that meant that I had no protection at my train crossing. Now, there are train crossings that have crossing guards, lights, bells and so forth, but I don't have that. So I went to the train horn committee and I said, I'd like safety at my crossing as well. And they said, we don't need that. We don't need to upgrade your train crossing.
Can I ask you for a minute, just to make sure I understand? So your driveway, your easement that crosses that track, requires the train to blow the horn because that's an easement. If that easement was not there, if you were not there, would that mean that that area would be naturally quiet because they wouldn't have to blow their horn?
If there was no train crossing there, they wouldn't have to blow their horn.
And that train crossing, so you are the exclusive, normally that easement is for your service.
Yeah, it is a little complicated. I have a private train crossing as opposed to a public train crossing.
Okay.
They don't have to blow at private train crossings. They have to blow for public train crossings. So I get the benefit of the horn noise, or the liability, if you want to call it that. I get the benefit of it because they're blowing all the way through there.
And the reason they're doing that is to make sure that it doesn't sneak up on you. A 70-mile-an-hour train rushing through there, you want to hear it coming.
You want to hear it. And we
And
have
so-
people killed on this track all the time. You hear about it in the newspaper.
It is a common, they don't realize, especially
But
in Vancouver.
here's the problem why they didn't want me there, is that if I only lived at my house, then my neighbors could have a quiet zone and not have to upgrade my private train crossing.
Before they moved in, was the standard practice for the horn, the train always blow the horn every time they...
Yes.
So that was just, before they ever constructed their neighbors' homes,
Right.
that was just the environment that was already there. That was natural. That was a safety thing.
The train track was built in 1908. Okay? There were farms out there. And Vancouver has spread, and so people don't realize that. It's a 1908 train track that went along the Columbia River because that was the easiest place to build it. Evergreen Highway was built in 1922.
Okay.
So it's old.
Yeah.
And they've been blown. When I moved in 1984, I just figured that I was going to have horn noise. I didn't think anything of it. I liked where I was living, and I got a little, ranch house, a little tract house in a nice area, and kids could grow up there, and it was great.
And so when your neighbors moved in, that train horn started driving them nuts, and they're thinking, we got to do something to stop that train horn.
They've been trying for years.
But the problem is, it sounds like, is that in order to do that, they would have to encroach on your private property rights, and they would have to take away that safety feature that would potentially allow that train to sneak up on you.
In a way, the federal government doesn't require that they upgrade private train crossings, only public train crossings, in order to get a quiet zone. So the public train crossing that goes into Steamboat Landing development would be upgraded to 4 gates, better lights and so forth, and they don't have to legally take care of my private train crossing that I use, except that there's 3 homes that use that train crossing, not just me. Including Scott Campbell when he lived there. newspaper owners. Yeah, he used that crossing as well. He didn't have a permit to use it, but he did use it. And so there were people coming across there. But the problem is that you would think, okay, well then they didn't have to consider me. The only thing is that because I had a home occupation permit, because I had a business on that side of the train tracks, that private crossing became public. It was open to the public, which meant that the train horn committee had to budget for upgrading that crossing as well, if they wanted a quiet zone. I thought it just made perfect sense to do it anyway, just for safety. I mean, why would you want 70-mile-an-hour trains going through there and no protection? It didn't make sense.
Okay.
The upgrading would mean actually putting those arms that go down,
Right.
stoplights that flash,
Yes.
so cars actually are forced to stop rather than use their own judgment on when it's safe.
Right. That's what would be required. Or routing traffic to another train crossing. And there was a road that I could have used to, my crossing is at 144th Court. There's another crossing at 147th in the River Shore development area. And I could have taken the road, the back road, to that crossing. Mr. Campbell didn't want me to do that because that road would cross the northern part of his property. So he lobbied against my ability to use that road. And that's why they had to, since Mr. Campbell didn't want that.
His property rights were honored.
Yep.
They
Expected.
well, except it is a public right-of-way through there. It's a road he doesn't own. But nevertheless, he didn't want that to happen. And so what happened is that they said, well, the next best option then is we'll get rid of Kathy's business permit. Because if I didn't have a business, then they could ignore the private crossing. So they came after me. The city of Vancouver came after me. My neighbors came after me. And it got so extreme that I was being screamed at. The neighbors were blocking the road with cars so that I couldn't get by. They were calling in complaints about my dog, my fence, my employee parking her car at my house. I was hit, I was bit, I was arrested. My children were screamed at. It was hostile. It was awful. I was sued. You know.
So basically, you've got two motives here. One is the neighbors wanted silence. They didn't want that train keep blowing its horn. Two, in order to get that silence, you need to be able to upgrade that. So you put the arms that come down, and that involves expense.
Right.
Who would pay for that expense?
Well, they lobbied the Washington legislature to change the law so that they could develop a local improvement district for our area, which meant that the neighbors, all of us, would pay a percentage of what the cost would be to upgrade train crossings.
So all the neighbors who wanted silence, if they
Right.
wanted silence, then they could say, okay, we're going to have to increase our taxes in some way to pay for that crossing.
Right.
But if you didn't have a business in your home, then they wouldn't have to upgrade that crossing,
Right.
and they would all save money.
It would cost them less.
And you could potentially have silence.
Right.
But then, in order to do that, the price that has to be paid is somebody has to give up their private property rights, which is you'd have to give up the business in your home.
Right. And safety.
Right?
I would have to say fine.
Because you're still going to live there.
I'm still going
So
to
you
live
still
there.
have to cross the track, so it's really increasing the reason that they put those, to blow the horn or put the crossings, is so that you don't lose your life.
Right, exactly. So in the course of being sued and looking at city employee emails and so forth, what we discovered is that my neighbors in the city were communicating about how to get rid of my business, how to get rid of me.
Yeah.
And if they got rid of me, then they could get their quiet zone.
Yeah, and it's not just you crossing those. If you have
No.
clients coming to you, they're not familiar with it. They want to hear that train coming because they maybe have never been there before.
Right.
You got a 70-mile-an-hour train coming down the tracks.
It's very scary, and I tell people this all the time. We always, when Michelle lets a new person know that they're, arranged an appointment, she reminds them, she sends them information about how to cross the train tracks safely.
Good.
She sends them pictures, she reminds them, and I'm always telling people, people think that a huge train going that fast you would be aware that, but there are too many people who try to beat the train. They think because it's big, it doesn't look like it's going as fast as it is, but it really is going dangerously fast. It will kill you.
Yeah, I believe that. So the neighbors decided that they're going to try to, with this quiet zone, and so this, rather than, did they approach you and say, can you cooperate us with us on this to be able to?
No, I had no idea why I was being harassed. This is all after the fact. When you're asking me why they did this, I didn't know.
And the harassment was really trying to get you to not operate a business out of your home. That's the form it took.
The very first complaint, I got a 24-hour notice from Vancouver Code Enforcement. Richard Landis gave me 24 hours to shut down my business. I got a faxed citation.
That was your first.
My first contact.
This is out of the blue.
Out of the blue.
You had no conversations with any neighbors or anybody. Out of the blue.
And Code Enforcement, that was 2004, like May or June 2004. And normally, you know, they on their website they say we give people a chance, we go and talk, we find out if there's anything that can be worked out. Not me. I got 24 hours to shut down my business.
Did they give you a reason?
They said they'd received a complaint that my business was.
Is that a nuisance?
I can't remember what they said, that I was causing a problem to my neighbors. They told me to fire my secretary and shut down my business.
And
it was before Michelle was working for me.
Different secretary.
But yeah, I didn't know what this was about. I thought I'd been here for 20 years. Why, you know? So I quickly contacted the attorney, an attorney to help me with this. His mother was was ill and he had to leave town. And so I contacted the city myself and I said, can you give me a little time? I've contacted my attorney. I can't do this in 24 hours. And they said no. And so I had to do a lot of work to keep this going. It was just weird that they were so angry with me. My neighbors were extremely angry. They had just moved in April, something like that.
Of that same year?
That same year, yeah. They were brand new neighbors. And I just thought, so I went over to talk to them. I still didn't know it was the quiet zone. I went over to talk to my neighbors. I said, I made a copy of the deed. I showed them my, I was giving them documents to show them that I wasn't doing anything illegal or whatever.
Because you knew the complaint was from them?
Oh, yes.
Because they were the only neighbor that would have changed.
Neighbors talking to neighbors, you go try to work it out and say, show them that I have a business. All it is, I have periodic people come to. I'm not manufacturing. I don't have delivery trucks coming on a regular basis.
Right. I'm not. It's not a bowling alley. I'm a psychologist. For heaven's sake, it's very quiet. In fact, the previous neighbors didn't even know I had an office in my home, and they lived next door to me for 15 years. They never even.
So
knew.
You went to your neighbors. How did they receive you?
They told me to leave, and they told me that I was a liar, and that it's a little more complicated than that. They were also angry that I was using the easement that I have used for nearly 30 years now. I have an easement that goes down to the Columbia River. So they didn't want my clients using the easement, and they didn't want me using it.
Is there any question, do you have legal right to use that easement?
Oh yeah, they sued me, and the judge found for me in summary judgment, and then they amended their petition and sued again, and the judge found me. We went to a 1-week trial on this.
Who sued?
The neighbors.
Okay.
The neighbors sued me over this easement, and I won again. They appealed to the state appellate court and lost. I won again. It's clear, it's a 150-year-old farmer's easement. Lots of people have the right to use it, not just me. And I'm not on the Columbia River, but I have the right to take the road down to the river. And they were just determined. They probably spent $500,000 suing me.
And this must have cost you something to defend yourself.
Well, yes, it did. And I've had to borrow in my house twice to come up with a cost to defend myself from the arrests, the police investigations, the code enforcement investigations, and it's destroyed my children's childhood. They were just entering high school, and all the years that they were going to high school, my 2 girls, they were afraid to walk outside of the house for fear the neighbors would photograph them, scream at them. Well, Michelle knows because she's there seeing what's going on.
Yeah.
So it's been awful, and I don't know when I'll pay the bills off.
How, it's obvious that that neighbor that you went to chat with had a lot of influence on the other neighbors. How long
This
did you
spread. It was, like I said, the first complaint that was filed against me was filed by Jody Campbell of the Scott Campbell, the newspaper owner. She complained, she called my secretary, and she scared her to death. She says, I'm going to shut that business down. I was so startled. I thought, she must not understand. I've been here all these years. So I went to talk to her before I talked to the other neighbors. This is all public record now because this has all been part of lawsuits. So this is not, I'm not telling you anything that isn't already out there, except it doesn't ever appear in the newspaper, but except in the U.S. Observer. But at any rate, I went to talk to her. She wouldn't come to the door, but Scott came to the door, and he said, yeah, we were, I told Jody to stay out of it, and that I didn't want to get involved, but they were involved. And that was terrible. So yeah, it spread, and the next thing I know, all my neighbors at Steamboat Landing Development who want the quiet zone, the Homeowners Association is rewriting their bylaws so that I'm not allowed to go over there. I'm prevented from visiting any friends that I have over in Steamboat Landing. It's against their rules. And they decided to post a wanted poster on the front gate to say that if they see me, if anybody sees me, I need to be, they need to call the police.
How can neighbors say that you're excluded from our neighborhood? How can they do that?
Oh, well, it specifically, they can do whatever they wish. It doesn't mean it's legal. But the rules are that I have to be accompanied from the front gate to somebody's house. I can't just drive in and go visit somebody, or I can't walk over.
So it's a gated community.
Yes.
And because it's a gated community, there's some exclusions that you can do. But I would think that you can only go so far to exclude until you trample on the rights, the civil rights that we as citizens can enjoy. I mean, if you want to go visit somebody, they ought to be able to have visitors and not exclude somebody. Now, it's in their
homeowners. It's in their homeowners minutes.
Or something?
No.
So
it's in their homeowners minutes. They talked to the Vancouver police, Lieutenant King, now he's Commander King, and Richard Landis of Code Enforcement, who I think he's retired now. Those two people said, yes, you can. Please call us any time that you want to have. If Dr. Marshack is trespassing, we'll have her arrested.
And this is all documented.
It's all in their homeowners minutes.
You have a picture of a sign they put up
yes.
outside their public gate, and you would think this looks like. Does it say that there's some legal action, or you got a restraining order or something?
Yes, they say that a restraining order has been filed. This was in 2006. It looks 7/6/2006, and it says, they said they filed a restraining order, which is not true. They didn't have a restraining order. They didn't file one. They didn't get one. I think they just were traveling with a lot of gossip that I'm a dangerous person, because my immediate neighbors wanted the easement shut down, wanted the quiet zone, and they just thought, well, they'll post that. And the homeowners minutes indicate that they felt this perfectly justified doing it because the police and code enforcement authorized it.
Are those bylaws, do they still say that you're excluded?
Well, the last documents I have are probably from 2 years back, maybe 2009 is the last time we got documents that show this.
Now, what was their tactic? Did they still see you as just simply, did they attack your credibility? Did they make you say things that were untrue about you? What was the, why couldn't you just simply appeal to our local representatives here and say, hey,
I did. In 2004, when I first started being harassed, I contacted the city citizen advocate. Vancouver has something called a citizen advocate or a city ombudsman. That time it was Jim Jacks. Jim Jacks later went to run for state representative, and then that he's recently resigned. The stated reason is because he was alcoholic, but who knows what the real reason is. That might be it. But at any rate, he was the citizen advocate, so I emailed him shortly before my birthday, actually. The report that he wrote came out on my birthday. So September 3rd or 4th, I emailed him, it was like on a Saturday, and I said, I don't understand what's going on. My neighbors are coming after me. The city prosecutor, Josephine Townsend, at the time, is harassing me like crazy. The code enforcement officer, Richard Landis, is coming up, inventing things that I'm doing wrong that are not against any city codes. And I said, I don't understand what's happening. You're the city ombudsman. Can you do something for me?
And that's his role. That's why he's there, right?
Right.
So you appealed to him.
I appealed to him because, you know, you can't always work your way through. The ordinary person can't work their way through the system. I didn't know
So
anybody.
he's there as a citizen advocate, too.
Right.
Just for
And a friend of
cases-
mine said, why don't you contact him? Right.
Okay.
So I did. And now, after the fact, that was in 2004. In 2009, at the same time I was attending I'm laughing because it was right about the same time that I attended one of the Quiet Zone meetings to find out what this was about. I was able to look at the letter that Mr. Jacks actually wrote, the summary, the report about me.
What did he do with that letter? Who did he send it to?
He sent it to the mayor, the city manager, city council, city attorney's office, code enforcement, basically the city hall.
So you sent him a letter.
I said, help
appealing
me.
to him, and did he reply back to you and say, sure, I'll help you, that's why I'm here?
Well, not at first. Instead, he contacted the people I was complaining about. He contacted the city prosecutor, Josephine Townsend, and Richard Landis, the code enforcement officer, and said, see Kathy's email here, please respond. So they responded with a variety of lies about me. Code enforcement said she's got a long history of code enforcement complaints. There were none prior to these new neighbors moving in, none. Before Jody Campbell filed the first complaint, there were none for 20 years. He said she's got a long history of complaints. She's been a nuisance for the longest time. Josephine Townsend told him that I was a functional sociopath, not fit to practice psychology, that I was thinks that the rules are made for other people, that I'm a danger to the community, so forth and so forth. That's what he wrote in his report.
So you have that in writing?
He wrote it down. I have the email. It's signed, all the best, Jim Jacks. He sends it out to all these people, and from that date forward, I was hounded. Worse than I've been arrested based on the fact that they think I'm a criminal.
So this is not just your neighbors that
No.
are taking a case against you. This is you appealed to the right resource, which
I will never do again.
Jim Jacks in the
and
city.
I recommend don't go to a city ombudsman.
Well, hopefully they're there to advocate for citizen rights.
Yeah.
And
But I
make
also
sure that
went to
people-
city council. I went to Larry Smith, Dan Tonkovich, and he's not on the council now, but Larry still is. I went to both of these people and I said,
Did
I
they
need
help you?
some help. They referred it to Jim Jacks.
And Jim Jacks wrote a letter that
And then he
was-
sent them the report, and Larry Smith said to me, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Jim Jacks finally called me after he'd written the report and said, I'm sorry, I can't help you. And in the letter, he says, Dr. Marshack appears to present a very convincing argument. She's articulate. It seems reasonable, but she's really a functional sociopath. You can't trust her, and she ought to lose her license to practice.
Now, you're a PhD licensed psychiatrist.
Psychologist. Right.
And they're telling you in their letter that you are diagnosed with something. Were you diagnosed with something?
Well, this is interesting because they said that my therapist, and I do have a therapist, most psychologists do, keeps us healthy. They said that my therapist testified in court against me, testified in court and has written reports to the city attorney that I am a functional sociopath.
So that's what they said.
That's what they said.
What was this truth?
The facts show that they never contacted my therapist at all, and he has never testified in court in Clark County at all, ever, for anybody, for or against. He's never written these reports. And yes, while I was going through all this harassment, I was diagnosed with depression, as anyone would be.
That sounds like it would be a natural
Reasonable.
response to...
You sound very normal.
It would be. It's very frightening. That's the whole point. It's very frightening to be harassed like this by the police, code enforcement, city attorney's office, city council people, the city ombudsman, and not know why. I didn't know why until I saw this letter in 2009. Then I only knew that Jim Jacks, Townsend, and Landis had written lies, but I didn't even understand why they would do that. I didn't know that it was because they needed to get rid of me. If I lost my license to practice, I sure wouldn't have a home occupation permit, would I? But I didn't know that even then. I had to start putting the pieces together.
I don't know what the official name, or definition of corruption or abuse of power or those kinds of things. When the government at any level, in this case the city, is using they're using their resources. They're paid by taxpayer dollars to do this, to infringe on your rights, to harass, to, it sounds like slander, libel,
It's called
discredit you.
malicious defamation is what it's called legally. Malicious defamation, when you tell lies about somebody and you know they're lies. It's one thing to be misinformed, to have an opinion, because we're entitled to free speech. We have our opinions, and you and I might have very different opinions about some things. But that's okay. We have free speech. But when you lie and you know it's a lie, that's a felony.
What was the motivation? Was there any personal gain or benefit from?
That's a good point. Why would the city take that side?
The city has been advocating for this quiet zone for a long time, and it is tied in with the Columbia River crossing, if you want to know about that.
How's it tied into the Columbia River crossing?
Well,
It seems so unrelated.
They do seem unrelated. However, in order to develop the bridge, in order to develop the waterfront in downtown Vancouver, you've got to think about Burlington Northern goes through there. And there's a lot of tracks down there. There's just not one. There's a lot of tracks down there. It's noisy. And they want to reroute some of those tracks. You know, they want to develop the waterfront to improve the community, bring business in. That all seems reasonable and so forth. And they want a quiet zone down there, and I believe they got a quiet zone down there. I'm not sure if that's been legislated yet. So the city's been actively involved, and I have letters from the city attorney's office petitioning, complaining about me to the Federal Railroad Administration, complaining about my home occupation. They're going out of their way. Why would the city attorney write a complaint? It's one thing for my neighbors to say, geez, she's a nuisance, but why would the city attorney's office contact the Federal Railroad Administration? Also the Public Works Director, Brian Carlson. I've got emails where he's complained that he's joked with my neighbors about, well, you know, maybe we can get her, maybe I can buy her house for $1 and get her out of there.
So the plot thickens.
It
You've
does.
got more and more
People.
government resources encroaching and attacking you. Michelle, you were Kathy's office assistant for years of this process. You were observing this. What were you thinking? What was happening here?
It was interesting because it just didn't make any sense. I mean, a lot of the complaints, the different things that were happening, both of us we just couldn't figure out why. It didn't make any sense. So we kind of think, well, maybe it's this and maybe it's that, but we never really figured out what it was. And it wasn't until 5 years later, when we got city documents through discovery, that we found these letters and the quiet zone, the emails from the city to BNSF regarding Dr. Marshack in the quiet zone, which is like, we're going, that was 2004. And it was interesting to start putting the pieces together as far as why it all happened, because it didn't make any sense.
So you couldn't figure it out. What would be the motive? And then and then you discovered in 2009, you said?
I think
2 years ago?
Was it 2009?
2009.
There was a motive behind this.
Yes, that not only the Jim Jacks letter, but all those emails to Burlington Northern among city officials, and my name just kept popping up. Somehow I was the problem for them getting the quiet zone and routing traffic, safety. They wanted safety. They kept saying, we want safety. Well, we'll have safety if we just get rid of her.
And we don't want to pay for it.
right? One of the things that one day Michelle came to me, I mean, you could think of it as just neighbors that are mad, but, and everybody's had neighbors that have, or not everybody, but some people have had neighbors that have been difficult, but my neighbors were going above and beyond. One day Michelle came to me and she said, Don's driving by with his window rolled down and with the camera in his hand.
Videotaping.
He was videotaping. It turns out that he took over 50 video clips of my clients, my house, me. I don't think he caught you. He caught your car.
Oh yeah, my car's recorded.
A number of times he videotaped your
Documented.
car. And he turned these videos in to code enforcement as evidence that I am this terrible person, that I have a business in my home. Code enforcement then began to prosecute me based on these videotapes. However, we didn't know the videotapes existed. We just saw him driving by once or twice. We didn't realize it was 50 times. And what happened is that when I got arrested, they arrested me for stalking this same man, taking videotapes. They said I was videotaping him, which isn't true. And at the time they arrested me, they had those 50 videotapes in their possession, the city of Vancouver.
This is becoming a little bizarre.
It's movie
Yes.
material, seriously.
Yeah.
Well, so my attorney, we didn't know about these videotapes. So my attorney was interviewing my neighbor, Don, in court, saying, have you ever taken any pictures of Dr. Marshack in terms of this harassment? And I knew that he had taken pictures of me because I'd seen him stop with his cell phone and take a picture as I'm walking down the river. And the court had ordered him not to harass me after I won my rights, so they were continuing. So he said, no, I didn't bring anything. And my attorney said, why not? And he said, well, because I turned it over to Richard Landis at the city of Vancouver. And my attorney had already made a public records request twice before this, and the city had never turned over those videotapes, never. And so at the lunch break, my attorney goes over and speaks to an assistant city attorney, Charles Isley, who's been handling the case for a while, and said, we want the videotapes. So we got these 50 videotapes, and at that point, the city said, okay, we'll drop the charges against her for stalking, because obviously she was being stalked. But did they arrest my neighbor? No. They have not been arrested for stalking me. My neighbor bit me. Another neighbor hit me in the head. They've threatened to kill my dog. They chased my daughter with a shovel.
So this is really turning ugly.
It's been very ugly, and they were never once arrested for all the things they did to me or to my children or to my clients.
When code enforcement, what code are they trying to enforce? How could you violate a code? What code?
Well, let's see. Having a home occupation,
But you had a license for that.
Yes,
Yeah.
you can have a home occupation, but you're not supposed to destroy the neighborhood. It's a residential neighborhood, so they only want businesses that are quiet. Well, I have a psychology practice, one car at a time, it's quiet.
So your customers weren't all screaming.
My neighbors, when
you
they
can't get much more quiet than
no.
Yeah, no.
counseling people in your home.
They complained that, let's see, what did they complain about, Michelle? They complained about where the cars were parked, that I parked on an old dirt and gravel driveway. My house is 1954.
You have a driveway.
I have a paved driveway. I also have a dirt and gravel driveway. And so I was cited for having cars parked on the dirt and gravel driveway.
On your property.
On my property.
How could they cite? How could they have a code that says you can't park
They
in your
didn't.
driveway?
They didn't have a code.